Hey guys, HuShang here. Welcome to another Starcraft 2 lesson. In this lesson, we're going to be looking at a more high-level advanced concept. So for you Diamond or Masters Terran players, we're going to be looking at when to attack, which is a common question I get. It's kind of a complicated topic, so I have a couple replays here to try to illustrate it as best as I can. But yeah, I'm playing against a Terran opponent here, Endless or Wave in this game, and I'm basically doing like different builds in our practice session. So I'm going to show you guys when you should go for the attack, when it's not so good, and yeah, hopefully this helps illustrate when you should be going for the pushes and when not to go for them. Okay, so the way I like to think about when to go for these attacks is based on kind of like a balance beam. So it's not sort of a thing where you do a build that's aggressive and then you always attack, because you have an opponent and they can also be doing a relatively aggressive build, or they could be doing a medium greedy build or a very greedy build. So based on that, you have to be judging where your opponent is on that spectrum and then deciding when to push. Okay, so all of these games, Endless is going to be going for a 3-1-1 build. So in this game, he's doing a mine drop, and then he's setting up for this like 3 racks push. All right, it's not like a future perfect build, but it's pretty good, I think. It's maybe like a low GM level, which is quite strong. So here you can see that I'm going for, as the Protoss player, I'm going for a Forge, I'm going for a Colossus, and I'm getting Charge. So looking at this right now, this is basically like the standard Protoss setup, right? Like they're kind of moving towards late game, they're getting some upgrades, they're getting some tech, but they're not overdoing it, right? So we don't have, let's say, these gases and this gas. We don't have, 66 workers and a 4th base. We're kind of treading the line where we're supposed to be able to hold this 3-1-1 push. But we're not really setting up so that we can do an attack afterwards. And we're not really setting up to be, super greedy and hope that our opponent doesn't have a sharp timing. We're basically treading the line perfectly. So from the Terran perspective, whenever you see this, you'll want to do a scan here, and if you see this kind of setup where it's like, a little bit of tech, they're not over making workers or tech or anything, and they're not rushing a 4th base too fast, you really don't want to go into these pushes too quickly. So I believe this is one where I kind of coached him a little bit, and the correct thing you want to do here is kind of set up a position outside the base and just kind of make Protoss uncomfortable, right? Because you're not going to kill Protoss here, where Protoss is treading the line perfectly. All you can really do is trade efficiently, right? So I've had him kind of sit back a little bit, set up the Widow Mines, and if Protoss tries to engage you, you get a really good trade here. But it's not, you're not going to kill the Protoss for sure. Yeah, I think overall, actually, this probably wasn't too bad for me as Protoss, just because the Widow Mines didn't get amazing shots. If those were all burrowed and they hit the Zealot clump, this would have been a really amazing trade for Terran. But you can see it's not really possible for Terran to kill the Protoss here, unless the fight was like a dream fight, But you shouldn't be aiming for that, right? So this is a very standard game. And if I keep playing here, you'll see that Endless gets into like a pretty decent position, right? Even though that wasn't so great. A little bit of harass here. If I had to give some feedback to Endless here, I would say to just position these units a little bit better on the sides of the map. Like, I think Terran's objective right now should be to kind of sit in this zone on the map where you have a little bit of leverage because Protoss can't push up this tiny ramp. And the other army should be over here, kind of denying this 4th base, or even just killing these observers would be really, really strong. And if Protoss expands to this side, you can kind of do the opposite, where this top army is poking over here to cancel the base, and the other army is maybe threatening some drops. So kind of just sitting on either side, poking lightly while you tech up into these units that can actually fight Protosses in the in like a straight up manner. So yeah, I think this is our first example. Let's just move on to the next example. So in this game, when it's kind of Protosses playing exactly like you would expect, you don't get too aggressive. Yes. Okay, so this is the one where I play a basically an all-in build. So keep in mind what we saw in the first game, and let's compare that to what I'm going to do in this game as Protoss. So I'm gonna open up pretty similarly. I think he does slightly different build. I'm pretty sure he goes Hellion in this game, but it's basically the same idea, right? Some sort of 1-1-1 into harass and then going into like a 3 racks timing push. Okay, so we can basically ignore all this early game stuff. I get a third like before. I defend this drop. And then now as a Protoss, I'm going to be going into like a very aggressive all-in style where you do not want to be attacking as Terran at all. In fact, you want to basically just be hiding in your base. Right? So you can see it's set up here. It's not ideal actually, but okay. So he does the scan. And this is where you need to be picking up some info as the Terran player. So he's doing his 3-1-1 push. And right about now, you should scan Protoss and just see if this is actually a good idea, right? So if you remember in the first game, I think I had like 1 Colossus at this time. And I had a bunch of Zealot because I was going for range on the Colossus. I was going for +1 attack. And I was getting more probes as well, right? I think I had a sentry or 2. So there was a lot more investment into the later stages of the game. And in this game, I basically am only spending my money on units, right? So I have no forge. I have, a Templar Archives. I'm not researching Storm though. I'm basically just going for mass units. And I'm going to try to just clobber my opponent, before we even enter the middle late game. So in this position, he should have basically just cowered back at home. Like, as the Terran player here, you should never even leave your base. Because there's no point, right? Like, the Protoss is not getting better over time, whereas Terran is getting the +1 upgrade, right? We're getting medevacs that are nice in the late game. We're getting all our infrastructure up, and we even have a better economy here if you check the workers. So this attack is a very, very big mistake in this game. And you're going to see it leads to disaster really quickly. Protoss has a massive Warpin in the main. There's a huge army over here as well. And it's just not really possible to defend in this position. So I think this situation happens a lot on ladder. And when you run into this as Terran, you feel like Protoss is super broken. Because, how do you defend this if you're out on the map? And the answer is basically like you don't, right? You can't get into this position in the first place. You need to recognize that in this position here, when you're moving out for this push, that Protoss is just too committed to units. And so you can't be getting massive leads in terms of economy and upgrades and stuff and try to kill Protoss. It just doesn't really work that way. Like, relative to each other, Protoss should be the attacker in this position and Terran should be the defender. Even though you're setting up for this kind of 3 racks push. Even though you're committed to an attack, Protoss is committed to an even bigger attack, right? And so you have to be the defender. All right, and I have one more example for you guys. And in this last game, I'm going to be playing the opposite side of the spectrum. I'm going to be playing super, super greedy. So you have to recognize this situation as well. And in this situation, you actually want to be attacking really aggressively. You want to basically try and kill the Protoss. So let me fast forward the opening here. I forgot all this typing I wrote. He had a friend in here, so I was pretending to be Showtime and Zest. All right, so quick blink, fast third base. It's basically exactly the same right now. And instead of going for, you know, only gateways here and units, or just going for one forge and a robo bay, I'm going to be going for a double forge and a robo bay. And on top of that, if that wasn't greedy enough, I'm also going to be getting 66 workers. So this position here is basically, you can't not attack Protoss and kill them here and enter the mid game, because if you enter the mid game from this position where Protoss is being this greedy, you're just going to be screwed. Like, I think this happens a lot as well, where Protoss is really not towing the line correctly. They're being way more greedy than they're supposed to be, and you don't kill them. And then your mid game just feels impossible because Protoss has twice as many upgrades as they're supposed to have, and they have, you know, what is this, like 8 more workers as well. Maybe even more than that, like 10 more workers. So it's just an impossible situation. So you really need to do a lot of work right here and kill Protoss before they get into this position. So you can see here that Endless is making a big mistake because he did not commit to that really strong push off the 3-1-1. Instead, he's going up to 5 barracks and he's got his third down. And so he's not going to be able to kill me here. It's going to be a pretty easy defense for me. And I just have way too much tech. So instead of doing this, he needed to commit much harder to the initial push, and I should have died here. So yeah, after all these replays, you can basically see, like, you really have to be judging where Protoss is on this spectrum of greed, and then make your decision about when to attack. So it's not as simple of an answer as you might like, but I think if you just consistently do the scan around your timing push, you should really get a good feel for when you're supposed to be, you know, hiding at home if it's an all-in, pushing lightly if it's standard Protoss play, or really going for Protoss's throat if it's something like this, where it's very, very greedy, right? I think the scan in the really aggressive game was about now. So if you look at this, what I have now, it's, what is this, like 200 gas, 100 gas, 300. We have a couple sentries, maybe like 500 gas. And then you imagine the game where I was hyper aggressive and I had 5 Archons, right? Which is 1500 gas. So if you just kind of try and count the gas in this position, you can really get a feel for how much is locked away in later game development, like the 1-1 and the range and the charge and the extra workers, the sentries, right? So there's a lot less value in this army, and that can give you good insight into when you should push. Okay, I think that is it. Hopefully you guys learned a lot from this. If you did, make sure to like the video, come join the Discord. I'm still doing coaching. If you want to get some lessons with me, just check out my website, HuShangCoaching.com. And I think that is all. So I will see you guys in the next one.